You are now listening to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. We preserve the history and sport of hunting through curious conversation and action-packed hunts, as well as offering you tips and strategy for more successful hunts. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. This is episode number 142. We're in March already. Jake, how's it going? Are you is your spring coming quickly? You fair weather worker?
Yes. Fair weather. He jokes because it's been raining like cats and dogs the last couple of days here in Oklahoma. And today was one of those. And I cut work early because of that. So I'm now labeled as a fair weather worker.
That's true. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like all the nice parts of the year is like when you have to work, and then all the dumpy parts of the year when you want to stay inside is like your slow season. But I guess that's good. It is good for deer season. But it seems like by the time your stuff slows down, it's like we're dead. We're like done with hunting for the year. It's like, I don't want to hunt. It's December.
Yeah, but also it's colder than a witch's tit. And so it's just like, I'm okay to stay inside, you know?
Yeah. I get that. You picked that career path because you just really value time with your family during the winter, like the holidays.
I picked it. Yep.
I picked it.
Yep, I picked it. COVID had nothing to do with that. Yeah. No.
So we recently published a video that we did a lot of research for, talking about a fairly controversial topic, I guess you could say, in the deer woods. It seems like there's a lot of folks that are on one side of this argument, but we did a video about the void. You've heard it called a lot of different things: the void, no man's land. What's the other one?
Dead zone.
The dead zone. That's right.
After the video was published, I got a text from our taxidermist, and he said he calls it shoulder shock, but he 100% believes in it.
Shoulder shock.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. I think I have believed in it at one point, but you did a lot of research on this topic. We feel like we've had some experience with this topic. Why did you want to do a video on the void? Is it because there's so many folks that are interested in this topic? Like, we posted a short form video on YouTube Shorts. I think it's probably our most commented on video on YouTube Shorts. Like, people are very fired up about the void.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know how we got into it because like last year we got on a roll on making those educational TikToks, right? And so if you have TikTok on your phone, be sure to check us out. Hunting season's usually a little slow on informational stuff, but we're starting to roll back around and into those, and they do fairly well. But late last year, that's what we were doing. We were just trying to bankroll those informational TikToks, and now we're putting them onto the YouTube Shorts. And it's not like we knew it was going to be special or anything, but
no,
it was just one of those that popped off. And so we put it on Shorts because now we're trying to convert all the old TikToks to the Shorts just for more content wise. And yeah, that one really popped off. And we're like, well, if that popped off, let's make it long form and try to go deeper into it. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, no, exactly. So I just realized we probably spent 3 minutes talking about the void. I'm sure most people know what it is, but if you had to give like a high level overview, what's the idea behind the void? You don't have to say if it's real or not.
No, I'm not yet. But to dumb it down for non-smart people just like myself, it's basically a little pocket of nothingness tucked in to the whitetail's chest cavity. And some people say like elk have it, and like different, like mule deer have it, different big game species. But obviously from our experiences, we have no anecdotal evidence of those other types. But yeah, and it's basically like a little pocket of nothingness above the lungs and below the back, the spine, the backbone of the deer.
So before you did all your research, don't lie. Before you did all your research, if you had to lean one way, like, yes, the void is real. I guess there could be a middle ground of like maybe or hell no, that's crazy. Which side of the fence were you on before you started doing research?
I believed in the void like 100%, and honestly, like I somewhat kind of still do in a way. Now,
I want to.
no, yeah, I want to, but I mean, because like, do they really know? Like, until obviously, I'm sure we'll get into that. I'm just going to stop myself right now. We'll get into that. But yeah, I did because of the like anecdotal evidence that like I've had personally, that you've had. I mean, we've all seen those trail cam pics, especially on our private land, of those bullet hole wounds or broadhead wounds that, you know, that look like they're like in the lungs and would be fatal, but here they are kicking. You know what I mean?
One of the examples that I thought of that like we're putting another video together. I won't say what it is, but I was looking at some kill shots, and I was looking at that shot where I basically shish kebabbed that giant 8 at Jesse's. Remember, like it was like the first week of October, and this was my experience that I was like, okay, this could be real because I shoot this buck, probably a mid 130s 8, dude, super mature buck. Like that would have been the biggest buck I'd ever shot at that point. And what happened was I shot him, he ducks, and you see my arrow go about halfway through him. It's sticking out on one side, sticking out on the other, and he's running off, and I don't spine him. And this, like, I'm not a whitetail anatomy expert, but I was sitting there looking at it like, okay, I got an arrow sticking out one side of the ear, sticking out the other. It's not in the spine. It's not in the lungs. Where the hell is it? You know, like that was my initial reaction. Like,
and on video,
it's in the void. That's what I thought.
And on the video, it looks far enough down where like you typically wouldn't think backstrap. You know what I mean?
No, I know. And those instances are the ones where I'm like, the void is 100% real. Like, in those instances, what experience do you lean on when you start thinking about the void? Like, if you had to think of something like, why something to support it or a reason that you thought it was real? Is there any like shots that you think of?
Yeah, I explained it in the video, my personal experience with it. I think it was when we were hunting public and we were all setting basically 300 yards from each other. It was like we were new to this piece, and this is before I think even had a smartphone or Onyx or anything like that. And so like I was hugging.
We did not have Onyx.
No. And so we just kind of walked a little bit down this trail and set up, and me and Christian could basically see each other from where we were, but like we were like on the opposite sides of this field, right? So yeah. And I set up, and I remember this day because like I was struggling. It seems like every single time I see a buck, I just struggle like that morning or that evening getting up into the stand. And I probably didn't get set down until like 8:15 or something. Like it's been light for a while.
I remember this because I was set up and I was watching you through my binos, and you were getting up into the tree. It was daylight. Like,
yeah,
it was
like
fully daylight.
It was like my first time trying to like film out of a climber. You know what I mean? And so like positioning the camera arm with the climber, because you would think you can just, I'm just going to put it a little bit above the top piece of my climber. Wrong, because when you sit down, your camera arm is going to be like 2 feet above your head. And so like if you just go to film a doe, you don't want to have to stand up or whatever. Like I know there's some people that say, you stand up regardless whenever you see a deer or think you hear something. But in this climber, the front bar's sawed off. And so typically out of that thing, I would just shoot sitting down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just basically gave up on it. And so that's why that's my excuse why it wasn't on film, at least. Yeah. Long story short, I hear something behind me. I'm sitting over this like little clear cut that has some tall grass growing up in it. And I look at the noise and I see the butt of a deer. And I'm like, okay, regardless of what it is, buck doe, I'm going to shoot at it. And it starts stepping out. Well, it happened to just be a really big buck. And it walks directly towards me. And then once we make eye contact, of course, it starts trying to prance off into the field. I stop it, draw back, shoot. This thing's just slightly quartered away, just ever so slightly. But it has his broadside shoulder, the shoulder closest to me, like up. That foot is up, like where he's about to take another step because I stopped him and he stopped mid stride. And then his back foot or his opposite side foot was like a little bit kind of mid body because he stopped mid stride. So just where the shoulder was. I shot using my 30 pin and I cracked him. And I remember saying this, and I still think to this day, like this was the most confident I've ever been on a shot. And shot, and I heard a big loud smack. And I was like, I just hit shoulder, but it was the opposite shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing started trying to take off, went into a ditch digger. If you don't know what a ditch digger is, it's where he was tripping himself up, where his face is basically dragging the dirt and is like, yeah, a ditch digger. Nothing, hardly any blood.
Oh, I have to give my color. Okay. So Jake and I are close enough where when you stopped him, when you're like, man, I heard it from my tree. I was like, oh. Like we were that close. And when you shot and hit him, I heard the smack, and I'm not going to attempt to do it really loud.
Oh, I forgot about this. Yeah.
But when you hit him, you heard the smack, and when he's running off, all you hear, and you've seen this on TV hunting shows, like, and it's very disgusting when you see it, but all I heard was,
no, it was like
yeah, like a roar as he's like, in sticks, it was like every stick was breaking. A buck that is just running off that's not mortally wounded is not going to be smashing and crashing. Like, I was like, and I watched on the other end of the field. I was like, I'm going to watch that way. If this deer gets out on the field, out of the field, I'm going to know, like, hey, Jake, he went like right this way. And I never saw him exit the field. And when I walked down to Jake, I was like, dude, he's done. I was like, he didn't make it out of the field.
And I kind of felt bad at the time because, like, literally I showed down. Yeah. Like as soon as I shot, I was like, I can't contain myself. I'm just going to get down, look for blood, and then get right back up in my stand. Cause it was like early. Like, I don't even think it was 9:00 yet. Mm-hmm. And so I got down and like looked around, and immediately I was like, I can't find any blood. Like, oh no. But he's basically tripped himself up trying to run away. He started roaring, and like I was like, oh, like I'm still fairly confident. And well, as I'm like getting down out of my stand, like I didn't think I was down for 3 minutes, and all of a sudden I see Christian walking through the tall grass towards me, and I think you thought it was a doe. I shot a doe or something because
I did. Yeah.
Because you were like, did you get her? And of course we were still far away, and I was trying to be quiet, and I just held up my hands like a rack, and I was like, big buck. And so long story short, like Christian was like, I didn't see him go out of the field. So like, he's dead in the field. Let's go get him.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
but by the time it was all said and done, like by the time Jared got there and we talked about it, like it probably was like 45 minutes, close to an hour.
Yeah. And keep in context, like this is in 2017, I believe. And yes, this is the biggest deer any of us have shot by 45 inches. Like, this is a mid 140s, probably 12 points.
So to explain the deer, like he was a mainframe 12, but he broke off one of his tines, I believe on the left side. It was like the G3 or 4 maybe. And it was broke, but it would still score, obviously, because like it was broke like maybe a quarter of the way up. So it would still score like a little bit, but that's beside the point. And like didn't even really care about that. But I just seen like this narrow racked buck that looked like it had a hand on each side. Like it was just filled with points, it seemed like, and they were fairly tall too. And I still think to this day, like, that buck was probably in the 140s for sure.
Yeah, this deer was like, we had him on trail camera. I'm so sad that I can't find the picture, but he was like AT&T raising the bar. You know, he's like 10, 8, 6, 4, like one of those deer, like, you know, just like that. But in the context of the void, what?
Yes.
Oh yeah, we were not just telling. Yeah. What ended up happening? Yeah, what ended up happening with the recovery on that one?
So the first blood we found was like maybe like a few hundred yards away. Like we were just like, okay, can't find any blood. Let's go over. Found a little bit of blood, far away, tracked it for a good ways, and then eventually just ran out of blood. Never found it.
Mm-hmm. And that made you think that was an instance where you're like, this could have been the
Yeah.
void.
Yeah, but at the time, I never heard of the void. So I was like, man, like it was just one of those shots where it just didn't bleed good. I thought like, okay, it only had one hole. The hole was plugged because of the arrow. The opposite side shoulder caught the arrow, so like only one hole and the hole's plugged. And it took off running super fast. And like my thinking is like just a bad blood trail. Like this was before like we knew dogs were legal to track, or even dogs were able to track deer. And so like it was just one of those like, tough luck basically. And it was a week or so later when I had a summer job on the grounds crew, and we were up there in Miami talking to the wildlife guys, and one of them said something about there's a hole, like a little pocket basically that you can run an arrow through or something, that if you hit it, like it's non-lethal. It's just basically a flesh wound. And that's the first time I ever heard about the void.
It's a shame that I feel like deer tracking with dogs came a long way in the last 5 years. It's a shame how young, dumb, and stupid we are, because that deer was very findable. I believe we would have found that deer.
I think so too.
I think there's a couple instances in the last 5 years where we would have done that. That was on public too, like a few good public bucks that we would have found that. But that's neither here nor there. Another instance of what potentially looked like the void. A couple does that I shot this January, a couple months ago. Those
do you think? Yeah, that's very true, and we can talk about that. But do you think that buck you shot 2020 at like 70 some yards? Do you think that could have been, or you think that was just like, I don't know?
No, that was stupidity on my part for tracking a deer about an hour and a half after we shot him, because that deer I shot this deer, didn't get great penetration, like 8 to 10 inches of penetration. It was like following the red carpet to him, and like,
it was great blood.
Oh yeah, I still have the video. Like we walked up, it was like standing up, like walking, and I remember coming up on this ridge, and there was the thick grass in there, and I was like, well, fixing to find him. And we took one step into the grass. Here comes a rack out of the grass. I was like, oh no. Like,
but dude, he was so discombobulated, like standing up. I still remember that. Like
I never saw him stand up. I just saw the horn.
Did you see him run away? Oh, that's like, and I was the one filming, and at the time the camera's pointed straight towards the ground, because I was like in awe, because I was like, damn, like that's like, I knew he was a pretty good buck, but like seeing him 10 yards away, like start standing up, and he was like, what's going on? And he was like, oh, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And like, he was a good buck. He's a very good buck.
He was. I don't think that one was the void either. I think the does that I shot in January, if you were looking for a better example of where the void would be, those were the example. Like 3 inches below the top of the back. And that if I didn't find those deer, those would have been a very easy one to be like, that was the void. And I feel like that's a lot of people's situation. They shoot a deer, they make a mistake on tracking, or the blood trail isn't good, or some extent to that, or they give up. Some people just give up easy, and they're like, well, that was the void. And I feel like there's a lot of that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I touched on the video too, is like, no, that's kind of what I touched on in the video too, because like for the most part, like shots happen very fast. Obviously, arrows can fly. It seems like 1,000 feet per second now. It seems like, and so for you to like actually see exactly where the shot hit, especially when the deer seems like they can do a burpee faster than you can blink, it's like, do you actually know where you hit it? And especially if you're anything like me, like sometimes like you get so worked up, like whenever you release like before you release the shot, and especially right after, it's like sometimes you black out, like you're just like, I think this happened, I don't know, like I'm lucky if I know what tree he ran by, so we can start blood tracking him there, And I don't think a lot of people realize just how quick they can duck and turn and move. And like another instance is like if they're more quartered away or two than you originally thought, because like it's all a different perspective, 18, 15 feet up in a tree. So it's just like you really don't know. I think like really where you hit, and that's where filming comes like really helps.
Even like when before we started filming, there was instances where I would hit a deer. I would know it would be not exactly where I wanted to hit the deer, and I would try to like convince myself like, oh, it wasn't that high, like, or it was just a touch low. And people, when you're not the one that shot it, you come in with a clear head. You're like, what does a touch low mean? Is that 1 inch low or is that 6 inches low? And you as the hunter, like, you don't want to be like, well, yeah, it was bad. It was, it was terrible. Like, I don't like doing that. And
Brisket.
I like thinking of you want to be optimistic, right? Because what's done is done. The deer shot, the deer has ran off. You're like, well, I think I'm going to get it. Like even the 13 point the 6x7 that I shot last year, like I didn't want to admit to myself, even with the video footage that I had, I was like, he wasn't quartered that much, he wasn't quartered like that bad. And then I watched the footage and I was like, he had to have been, or I would have got way better penetration than that on that shot. But videoing has changed the game for us, and in terms of like this kind of stuff on remembering where you hit a deer. Like beforehand, it was not a good situation.
No, and like so, like now we have the capability. Like if you film your hunt, you have the capability of slowing things down, seeing exactly like where they were positioned. Like did it really go in here? And especially like that's why we shoot Luminox. Like because it's better for like content purposes, obviously, because like Luminox are bad to the bone. It seems like, but like even without somewhat on a camera, you can see where they kind of go in. So I don't know, like I guess to wrap it around full circle, like if you don't have solid evidence, aka like a camera to see exactly where the arrow went in at, where your entry hole is, then like you really don't know, because like even if you're dead sure, like, hey, I know 100% I hit this thing right behind the shoulder. Well, from a previous podcast with the blood trail expert, that's sometimes false. You want to go in a little bit about that?
Yeah, let's talk about what so we had what's his name? It's losing. It's coming away from me now. He's from Get More Game Recovery.
Yeah, I knew his
service. Let me make 100%.
I see his face.
Oh, I see his face. Yeah, 100%. Let me see exactly.
If you wouldn't ask me, I would have been able to come.
Chad Haleski. That's who it is. Yep. Sorry, Chad. He's gonna be like, these POS.
We're idiots.
No, Chad Haleski, Get More Game Recovery, Michigan. He tracks over 50 deer a year. He really talked about this. Like, and one of the examples that he gave was what he does when he has a new client that is like, hey, I shot a deer. I need your help tracking. The first thing he does, he sends them a picture of a deer with a diagram on it. He said, where did you hit the deer?
Shot chart.
A shot chart. Yeah, you've seen them. I'm sure they're on I think they're on the Deercast app, has one. I mean, anyways, they're out there. And he has them estimate like, hey, I shot it here, I shot it there. And he said that's kind of one of the issues that he runs into with deer tracking is like a lot of times they find those deer. And if they say they hit it, oh, I hit it 2 inches behind the shoulder. He finds it. He's like, more like 8, or more like 10. And that's you and your human brain saying, oh, it wasn't that bad. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And he said that he saw that quite a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, therefore, like, I guess to bring it all home, like that for the most part is you hit the deer where you don't think you did. And so, and if you think you hit it behind the shoulder and it actually ducked where you backstrapped it, or it quartered to where you maybe just poked the shoulder or something along those lines, like that's more than likely scientifically from like the scientific evidence, that's what the void actually is. It's just basically like a backstrap or another non-lethal area that you hit and you just didn't know it.
So before we talk about the deer and deer hunting video about the actual anatomy of it, I think there's a few things that we could give people little nuggets on. One, it's hard to see your arrow where you hit exactly, even when you're videoing. If you're not shooting a luminok, it's
Oh,
hard.
right, for sure.
Like it's very hard, especially to your naked eye. Like Jake said, when you black out and things happen, that's very hard too. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, well, like for those who don't film, it's not like you're watching Guri outdoors, right? You like nobody has another cameraman that has 3 different cameras pointing at this deer to get every milliframe that the arrow is in flight, right? For most people, it's like, hey, I think I got it in frame. I don't know. I just had the lens all the way zoomed out. I hope it's in the frame. And so you're sitting there like trying to see a little corner of the screen most of the time if you're self filming, especially public. Like maybe if you're like hunting private over a feeder, like I'm guilty of, like it's not even something to be guilty of, but like most of the time, like it's going to be where the bad shots happen is probably where you don't expect the deer to come out at. And so if you get a shot off, it's just like you just got to wing it. And so you're already thinking of so many different things, but like, yeah, kind of like what you were saying, like the camera situation, like it's not all professionally filmed or anything like that. And so like that's why it's hard to see the arrow.
It is, yeah. Couple things. If you don't film your hunt, an easy way to identify more accurately where you hit is shoot some sort of luminok, whether that's a nocturnal, whether that's a luminok. I would recommend that for everybody. Yeah, they're expensive. They really are. They're like $10 or $15.
They last though.
They do. If you can find them. Yeah, you can find them. The battery's good. I think some of them you can even replace the batteries. That's good. Filming is a great one. Like you get the deer on film, that's going to give you so much more evidence. And I love filming because filming is agnostic. Filming doesn't get worked up. And it doesn't
using your big words. What is
it? Doesn't have high blood pressure. Like when I'm sitting watching a shot after I'm all jacked up, it doesn't care that I'm all jacked up. It's showing me exactly what happened.
Okay, you see, you use these big words to sound more photosynthesis, and I just don't like
it. That's funny. So shoot light and nox and film your hunts. That's a couple of things you can do just to know exactly where you hit. But more back onto the void topic before we give our opinions. What did you learn from the deer and deer hunting video and the research you did about like the anatomy?
So I think his name is Brian Johnson, who was like doing the little mini seminar of the roadkill doe, but he basically explained that like there's no gap and that the lungs actually sit up higher than the backbone. So the backbone is lower within the deer's anatomy than a lot of anatomy like diagrams usually show. And so, yeah, so basically you have the backbone and then you have the ribs that kind of like circle up a little ways. And then obviously the lungs fill basically the whole rib cage, and that the rib cage is basically like a little small vacuum sealed thing. And so it would take an arrow or a projectile of some sort to poke a hole in that. And then that's when it just discombobulates everything. And lungs collapse, and hopefully 2 lungs collapse. And but yeah, so basically like that means since it's like a vacuum sealed thing, there's no void, dead zone, no man's land, ball of nothingness in
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the whitetail's chest cavity.
That seemed really conclusive. I liked the way he did it, where he stripped away all the meat from the ribs and stuff. There was one thing that you mentioned in the video where you talked about like when he was inflating the lungs to like show exactly how they sat. It did look like he was inflating him to the point of like popping. Like
right, and that's
what kind of
that's kind of where I think like the void could possibly still be real, right? But I read a comment, and again, like, who is this guy? We really don't know, but he threw out his credentials like he's like a something to do with lungs, like he's like a lung expert, like obviously not for a deer, I don't think, but like I think for humans or something. And that's where I like he was in the comments, I forget, but that's where I got like the whole vacuum sealed thing. Like Brian Johnson did a really good job of explaining everything, but I kind of wondered that too. Like, I was trying to read through the comments, like, oh man, he inflated them too much. Like how much? Like actually, how much psi is supposed to go in the whitetail's lungs? And so I was going through the comments, seen that one, and he was like, I'm a lung expert. This yada yada yada, and that's where I basically learned that like it is like a vacuum seal, and that so the lungs don't actually inflate and deflate without the rib cage, right? So basically the lungs and the rib cage stay in place, but the diaphragm does its thing. And so the rib cage expands. And when the rib cage expands, the lungs expand.
And then they expand with it.
When it, yeah, exactly. So therefore there's no like gap, like, okay, oh, there's this much gap between the lungs and the rib cage and the spine. No, everything, like when the diaphragm works, it inflates or it expands the rib cage. Therefore, it inflates the lungs. And also when it decompresses, exhales, everything, everything decompresses. So therefore, the way that guy commented and explained it, that was like the light bulb moment for me. But who is this guy? Does he actually know? He sounded legit. I guess you could type and spell and sound smart. Like anything can sound legit. But I mean, that was that. But also, if you just take that comment aside and go from Brian's demonstration, it's just like there's still a possibility that the void theory could be real.
What about one of these deer that I'm trying to think of like I'm trying to make a comparison here with like a human, like people that are on like a ventilator and they have like weak lungs. Is there deer that have like weak lungs and their capacity is way lower? Could there be a void on one of those?
Yeah, but
a super obese deer, just its lung capacity goes down.
Little corn thief. I don't know. Like, I don't know, because like if you look at it from that lung expert's like view, then it's just like, okay, then he should have like a, I don't know.
Diaphragm.
Yeah. Like I'm just not smart enough. Right. And obviously there's a lot of people not smart enough where this wouldn't be as big as a controversy as it is.
Well, how many people?
What do you think?
How many people have cut open a live deer and watched its lungs inflate?
Well, that's the thing. Because like the way he was demonstrating, yeah, that's on a roadkill doe, right? Like he had a lot of things stripped away. Like you don't know. You do not know.
From an anatomical point of view, from the anatomy that I've seen in the videos that I've watched, my initial reaction is no. I do not think that the void is real, but I do think there are some scenarios that do support like something like this, but I think there are conclusions to those. And I wrote a couple of those out. So a couple things to consider. One is we hunt the South, right? For the most part. We don't hunt deer that have like big fat storages like I do sometimes in Southwest, but you get into these Kansas and these Midwest deer, they can have 3, 4, 5 inches of fat and meat above the spine. Right.
Basically
basically above. Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen that on some of the deer that I've shot in Southwest Oklahoma. Like you're pulling off a strip of fat that is thick. So I think that's what happened when I shot that big buck at Jesse's that one time was I hit above the spine. I really believe that. Like that deer ducked enough where I hit above the spine and that deer recovered.
Yeah, Jesse had on camera, didn't he?
Yeah, I found his sheds. I have his sheds.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, but I believe that there's on a big deer, there is enough fat where you can hit it high and be above the spine. I really believe that. Is that going to be most people's experience in the South? Probably not. Like you hit 110, 115 pound buck. There's no fat to miss above there's no meat to miss above the spine.
All those acorn fed bucks. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so here's another thing to consider. Depending on if you're high, if you're low, if you're shooting down on a deer, what orientation you are above them. Let's say you hit a deer in the chest cavity, you think there's a void and you hit a single lung. Well, a deer can survive a single lung.
That was my number one argument is like, it's rare, but deer can survive a single lung hit.
They can, they 100% can. So it's like, is there a void? Maybe, but to say that there's like, you can't assume that every deer that's hitting the lungs is going to die. Most will, right? But
Mhm.
if you hit a deer in the single lung, I think there's just too many instances of deer living on single lung
So
hits.
so humor me a little bit because again, I'm not the end all be all tracking expert, obviously. But the higher you hit on a deer, most of the time, the less blood usually leaks out, right?
Yeah. If
That
you
I have experienced it. Now, obviously, I'm not trying to go as stupid as okay, if you have a bucket full of water and you punch a hole in the top, like and then you slosh it around, only so much is going to come out. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm like I get like it's not basically just a bucket of blood. I get that.
yeah.
But from my experiences, it seems like those deer that are kind of shot high tend to bleed a little bit less. Now, I don't know if that's due just because of the shot placement of it being a little bit higher in the body. And so and then the shots that are a little bit lower, it seems like they can like they can leak and you still might not find them, because but it just seems like the lower you go, typically the more blood comes out or the better blood trail you have.
That was one of the things that we asked Chad directly when he was on talking about blood trailing and tracking was if you had to pick a high, like let's say directly behind the shoulder, if you had to pick 3 inches high or 3 inches low, which one would you rather have? And he said low. Like you got to think low, you have all the gravity working for you, right? So you're going to have more blood. Also, the heart is low, right? You hit a deer high in the shoulder, there's already, unless you get an artery, there's not a lot of goodies. Like a lot of those vitals aren't tucked up high; they're tucked low. So you can hit a deer 2 inches above the white on it and smoke it in the heart. Good example is the 7-point that I shot this year. It looked like I barely nicked him, like barely touched the deer. I heart punched him. He ran 30 yards and fell over.
Yeah, that is yeah.
That's not going to happen.
A wide load.
A wide load, yeah. Pencil horn.
Yeah, but the reason I bring up the high shot is just because like
the Hunter's Advantage podcast is powered by Out on a Limb Manufacturing. Out on a Limb is a family-owned company based right here in Oklahoma that makes tree stands, saddle platforms, climbing sticks, and so much more.
Christian, I have a quick question.
What's that?
What bites sound harder, a hippo or an alligator?
No idea.
It's a trick question. The Ridge Runner 2.0 bites harder than both of them. But all jokes aside, we use these products all across the land on public or private. These help us get into any tree we want and hunt where the deer actually are.
Most men go to the grocery store for their meat, but these products help you go to God's grocery store. I have used the Out on a Limb Ridge Runner 2.0 and the Shakar sticks for the last few years hunting public land bucks, and I've actually shot several bucks out of this setup. If you want to support the podcast and get some Out on a Limb equipment, make sure to go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA10 for 10% off at checkout. Once again, if you want to support the podcast, go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA10 at checkout for 10% off. Now let's get back to the podcast.
So the reason I brought up the high shot is just because like even if that shot is fatal and it doesn't bleed that well, kind of like maybe that's what happened to my buck on public that we talked about that 12-point. Maybe it was fatal, but the blood just wasn't good, right? That doesn't necessarily mean, oh, shot it, I thought good, bad blood, it's the void. No, maybe I only clipped one lung because it was sort of kind of quartered away. I did hit it right behind the shoulder. And if you think about it, like it could possibly have just clipped one lung. And so, yes, there's a rare chance of it living. And and did it die? I think so, just because it was the way it acted, the way it roared, all that stuff. And so, like, there's always those possibilities too.
There is, like, and I will bring this up for like the third time. The 2 does I shot in January. When we walked up to them, I hit them both high. They were super spooky. I legitimately hit them like 2 or 3 inches like below the top of their back. And
but they dropped. They hit the deck.
Yeah, they hit the deck, but they were both spraying blood as they ran away. And I was like, man, like I hit them both in the artery.
I didn't understand that though. Well, I guess it had to have been artery then, huh?
That's what I thought. Like, okay, I hit them both in this artery that runs, right below the spine. Like that's what I was thinking. And that was our initial reaction when Jake and I walked up to both of them. They were both terrible blood trails. We walked up to the first one. Jake's like, you already hit this one. I was like, oh, dang. Then we went and found the other one like 200 yards away. He was like, you already hit this one too. And I was like, dang, dude, I didn't even get into the cavity on either one of these deer was what I was thinking. Well, I wouldn't usually gut them because I would just usually skin them out and quarter them like right there. But I was like, I'm going to gut these deer because I want to see exactly what happened. And I took video of it, and it is in the video of this hunt. And I hit both of them I got both pass throughs through the rib cages, double lunged both of them. Now, it was like this far below the spine, like 1 or 2 inches below.
Were you shooting a
fixed blade? Yeah. Busted through 2 holes and a hole on either side of the rib cage, and it was in the cavity. Like I double lunged them.
I wouldn't have thought that from watching the video.
No, it looks like, oh, hey, you barely nicked them. You hit them in that artery. I think every deer is different, right? Like depending on the fat content that's on top of the back strap, or depending if it's a Midwest deer or if it's a buck, where you hit that deer, some deer can get hit way above the spine and be good. These ones, there was no extra fat on top of them, So it was like I hit them 2 inches below, and the spine was basically right at the edge of their back. So that was a good example for me of like on these particular deer, there's no way that you're going to hit something that you would call the void because there's nothing there. There's the spine and the cage, the rib cage. Now, these were late season deer. They had no fat. So that's something to consider. But like we were talking about on the high chest hits, the blood trails sucked. And if I didn't have that video evidence of, hey, I know they were spraying blood as they ran away and I know they were okay shots, I might have just looked for the first 100 yards and been like, dude, the blood sucks. I'm not going to find him. I just shish kebabbed him. That's what I might have thought. But
yeah,
wasn't the case.
It's wild. So if you were to boil it down into, okay, I'm going to ask you this since you asked me this and I didn't return the favor. Before the video, before all this, just from your anecdotal proof or anecdotal evidence, did you think the void was real?
I wasn't swayed one direction, but I thought it could be. I definitely was not ruling it out. I was like, there's a chance that this
Okay, so if you're standing on top of this mountain and the mountain's like the point of like a ballpoint pen and you had to lean one way or the other, which way are you going?
As like right now, after watching the video, then I'd probably say it's BS. If I had to pick one, in the beginning, and if I had to pick one today, I would still say it's probably baloney. Okay. Based on all the things that we laid out, right? Bad blood trails, not videoing your shots, not knowing exactly where you hit the deer. That is the kind of stuff that I'm saying gives me the confidence that the void isn't real. Could that happen? I'm sure it has happened to some folks in actuality, and I'm sure it will happen again. But I think 90% of those people that are in the comments that are saying it happened to me,
they had this experiences. Yeah.
I just don't agree with
that's literally what I was about to say is like I think that, damn it, that was my argument for my ending thoughts.
For your takeaway?
Just like I think it could spot, like even after the research, I think it could, and people's going to call me an idiot. It's just like, how could you look at all this evidence and then think this still? It's just like, well, because like we said, until we get a live deer and basically while it's still walking, just hurry up and go and rip away its outer goods where we see the rib cage and the lungs and everything still pumping. Sounds awful. That's why we haven't did it yet, I assume. And I don't want to say one way or the other, but kind of like you just said, I do think that probably 95% of the people, including myself, that, that me having that run in with the void or whatever, I think I probably clipped one lung, and it probably expired somewhere.
And we could have found that deer. I really believe that.
Yeah. I agree. But I think 95% of the people, including myself, just make bad shots or think they made a good shot and actually made a bad shot or a marginal shot and didn't recover the deer. I believe 95% of people didn't hit the void. There could be 5% or less that you never know.
Yeah, I agree. So what are I'm going to tell my takeaways on maybe how to prevent void arguments with yourself, getting yourself. I think the best way to not get pissed off about the void is just not hit anything that's relatively close to the void. So I think one of my takeaways from watching the video and all the research that you did was it's okay to cheat a little low. For me, I like to cheat a little low, and I would much rather hit a deer low than high. I just think you have a lot more good things working for you if you hit low than high. That is my main takeaway on the stuff that you did on the Boyd.
That's true. I've rarely seen a deer jump into a shot. I've seen a lot of them duck into a shot. So yeah, holding low seems like the smart answer.
I don't know. My grandpa told me, he said,
Oh no.
he said that there was, 30, 40 years ago, there were some deer that were so jumpy that he tried to shoot one with his bow, no sights. And he said, he swear before the arrow get there, the deer jumped up and it went under its belly. And I was like, what? I've never heard of that happening.
No. So that reminds me, because like I was for some, like I have certain podcasts saved, and if I don't have the best signal, like my phone will like glitch out, and then all of a sudden it'll play something that I already have downloaded, like just no matter what. And it played the Charles Beatty Pat Lane podcast that we did. Nick, I don't know how long ago it's been.
Last
at
summer,
least a year. Yeah.
Yep.
And so I was doing work, so I was like, well, I'm not going to change it. I haven't listened to this in a while. It'll be good. What you just said about the deer jumping, it made me think of what Charlie said about he was taking someone hunting, and he said like they started calling and rattling in a buck, and this buck got so close. He said Charlie was basically he was, I don't know if he was too scared to move or he just wasn't going to move because he was waiting on his buddy to shoot. And so he said, I just sat there covering my face with my hands, and he said, I just heard this deer walk past me. And he said, it basically licked my buddy's nose for him. And he said, but as soon as that deer realized what we were, he said, I don't know how they do this, but it's like his head went between his legs and out his ass. He said, they can just move so quick. And like, I lost it. The way he said that. And if you go back and listen to the podcast, like because you were interviewing both of them, and I was sitting on your couch just listening into the whole thing, and like you could hear everybody just start dying because like that was hilarious.
That's awesome. Yeah,
that goes between the legs and out his ass.
I wouldn't put it past him. My grandpa said when that happened to him, when that deer jumped that arrow, he said he went home, got the chainsaw, and cut that tree down, and that was the last day he ever bow hunt.
Victor?
That was the last time he ever bow hunted. He said, I'm sick of this. So he went and cut the tree down. He said it was an awesome tree that like had so many branches from the bottom that you could climb up it without a ladder.
Really?
And like he sat like 12, 15 foot off the ground up there. And he was like, I hate myself for cutting it down. He was like, it was an awesome bow hunting tree. But yeah. Yep, that's how it went.
Hunting will make you do that.
Yeah, it'll drive the man insane. So let's talk a little bit about the you got any other closing thoughts about the Void besides go watch the video? And
yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like, if you want to hear anything else about it, be sure you check out the video and subscribe. Damn it! Like, it doesn't cost you a thing to subscribe.
True,
but it helps. Like the video, share it,
do it. So we got a few questions from Instagram, and then we'll wrap this up. So I'll read the first one. It comes from Watson Ranch Outdoors. He says, how to grow simple cover crops. Apparently, Watson has not been following us for very long because we are not farmers.
He might have hooked on when we had Noah on, though.
He may have
jumped on that boat.
He may have. Yeah, we are not habitat management experts. The only way that I have ever done cover is called not mowing. That's how I've done it. What about you, Jake?
So so I actually seen this question and I was like, you know what, for once, instead of just saying that like we're not big into like the food plot type and habitat management type thing, I literally Googled simple cover crops just so we wouldn't have like that sort of answer. And the easiest cover crop that Google said would be clover. And
cover?
I think, and when I Googled cover crops, I thought that's what he was saying, like those tall grasses where it'd be easier for you for like your entry and exit routes. That's what I thought. But again, how property management savvy we are, or at least I am, I just went from what Google told me. And so I assumed that cover crops is something to do with like your food plots, like what you have thrown down as extra, like on top of like your radishes and stuff like that, because like obviously they're not just going to like cover the whole food plot. So you need those extra. That's what I gathered. And so
that shows you how much I know.
Exactly. That's the way I could be wrong. Do your own research, but that's the way I took it. And the crimson clover, because it grows really well in different soil types. So possibly where you're at in the country, it might still be able to grow, and deer are attracted to them and will eat them.
There you go. I think one point I wanted to make on that is it's not because we're not habitat experts because we don't want to be, but when we're landowners, I think you guys will see an evolution of the podcast where we start talking more about bedding area and habitat improvement and timber stand improvement. We're going to start doing more and more of that stuff. Right now, though,
until land prices go down, we're not going to be that type.
So maybe in a next life.
That's funny. All right. So the next one, it's now exited off. Dadgummit. Comes from Mason B43. Wonder who that is.
Oh, that guy.
Benefits for saddle hunting, pros and cons.
All right. You want to take the pros or you want to take the cons?
Or if you just want to name a few both, and I can name a few both, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Pros. Packability, huge one for me.
Okay.
Goes on a backpack real easy. You wear the saddle in, so the whole package it'll save you a few pounds of weight, but really it's the packability. Nothing is grabbing onto sticks and limbs as you're walking through thick cover, so it's just very, very packable. Another pro of the saddle is mobility. Like, it's really easy to go around the tree. I really like that about it. You don't have a primary, just one dominant shooting side like you do out of a tree stand. You can kind of pivot around the whole tree. And I do really think in 2021, that was why I was able to shoot one of my bucks.
Shot mobility.
Yeah. Shot mobility, being able to move around the tree. Cons, price. Saddles are expensive. Not everything is expensive about it. It's just all the little pieces.
I have an argument point to that, or whatever you call it.
Counterpoint?
Counterpoint, yes. The price is a little hairy, yes. But the thing is, like, you don't need to buy another stand, like another hang-on. And if you're the type of person that likes like a lot of hang-ons, like I want to set one up here, I want to set one up here, that eliminates that. You know what I mean? And then sooner or later, you're going to have to change ratchet straps, because typically, especially on private land, if you're that guy that has a whole lot of hang-ons, then more than likely, at least what I do sometimes, is I change the ratchet straps each year. I don't always do that, depending on, like how ragged they look. And I probably shouldn't do that, but I think in the long run, you'll save money. So basically, you're putting all the money up front, and you're basically, it's paying for itself on down the road.
Yeah. And it's buy once, cry once, for sure. It's like any good gear. You want a good bow, it's gonna be $1,500. You want a good saddle setup, it's gonna be a little pricey. But I mean, I have loved hunting out of a saddle for the last few years. I think it's been awesome. And Out on a Limb makes some freaking awesome saddle gear. Like, not only the sticks that weigh just over a pound a piece with the Shikars, but they make a platform called the Ridge Runner 2.0.
I like that one.
That sucker is pissed off at the tree. Like, it bites. I know you see a lot of saddle platform reviews, like when people are in them, and one of the big criteria that they evaluate them on is side pressure. Like, they'll jump on one side of it and then jump on the other side just to see if the platform will kind of work its way over one way. That is not a problem with the Ridge Runner 2.0. It cams over, and that thing has 2 points of contact. It bites to the tree really, really good. And that's the same thing with the Shikar sticks. I mean, that's the saddle hunting setup right there. Shikars and the Ridge Runner 2.0 from Out on a Limb. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, also, whichever preference like you like within a platform, you're going to get. Like, if you like a big platform with a whole lot of feet room, they got it. If if you're basically a minimalist, is that how you say it? Minimalist, yes. Saddle hunter, then they got those like
One stickers.
Yeah. What's the super small one called? Is it the Roost?
They have the Rut Roost, which is like an extra plate, a seat. They have a Monarch. What is it called?
That's what anyways, they got a super small one like that. And plus like my platform I use, you seat up with it. So whichever way, like you feel more comfortable with like hanging your setup. Like I got the podium, so you got to seat it up and then press down. And then with like the Ridge Runner, you basically like strap it and then seat it down and then push the platform down. And so like whichever, and I'm not trying to like go off on it or anything, but like it's super good gear.
Yeah, it's a Solo Scout they have, and then the Monarch, so they can go on top of the stick or whatever. Yeah. Anyways, there's a saddle hunting platform for everyone, and they make awesome gear. And we run cruiser saddles too. Those are really nice.
All right. And to go quick, my pros saddles are super safe, right? Like there's really no disconnecting from the tree. Your lineman's belt, and then you get up there. You hook your tether on, release your lineman's belt if you want to. And like you're never not connected to the tree, if that makes sense. And so super safe. It's quieter, like walking through, you don't have a big O. And I guess that kind of goes under your packability, but like it's not hanging off limbs, trying to pack it through. It's not sitting on top of your bag. Covered shooting mobility. And then like cons, I think everybody's pretty guilty of this con. I think a lot of people tend to move a lot more in a saddle, because before I was a saddle hunter, whenever I think it was 2021, we were on public, you tagged out and we were hunting together at the community center. I was still in a lock on. And when I hunt, like, I'm not kidding. I'm like this. I feel like, at least. And I feel like I'm a statue because I'm afraid of deer seeing me, like, like walking in behind me or something. I just don't want to move. And I noticed, because like, that's like, especially like if you're on a week-long trip, and like normally if you're just hunting with a buddy, it's just like, yeah, whatever. You're just kind of there to have a good time. Sometimes if you're like a few days into a rutcation or something, and especially if your buddy's already tagged out and he just sitting there going like this in the tree and just kind of swaying, I felt like that's what you were doing. I know you weren't to that extent, but like at the time, that's the way my mindset was thinking. I was like, man, this dude's moving a lot. Like if one walks in, we're going to get busted. And I thought you were moving a lot. And I was like, that's a big con of the saddle, like, already. And then I got into a saddle, and then all of a sudden I would, like, this last season, I would catch myself just start swaying and moving around. And I'm like, I bet you this happens to everybody. Cause like I caught this before I even owned a saddle, and then myself, I'm doing it. And it's just like, I feel like a lot of people move more than they usually would. And then another con, you mentioned price point. And then a lot of people say like swapping out layers, like clothing layers, like, you walk in, okay, it's super cold, I want to put another layer on. Typically people do that before they get into the tree. And then, like, let's say you hunt all day, you hunt in the morning, noon it gets hot, strip off layers. I usually don't see that problem. Like I see that on a lot of online forums, that like people's like, oh, you can't really adjust like your clothing in a tree. Well, I don't really think you're supposed to. Like on all day sits, how many people actually go on all day sits? I doubt a whole lot. And it's just like, you're basically in a diaper. Anything upper that's not like a big old onesie, you can take off. So I just don't see that viewpoint. But
I have not had that problem.
Anyways,
I change my hoodie or put my big jacket on all the time. So I don't do that. I think the number one con of the saddle is it's an investment in the front end, and that's pretty much it for me.
Also, they seem more complicated at first. Like whenever you're trying to get into the saddle game, you're like, what the hell's a tether? Like, oh, you got all these ropes connecting you. Like,
It's not
It
that overwhelming.
seems, yeah, it seems very overwhelming, but once you actually get it and you set it up once, you set it up a million times, it seems like.
Yeah, I agree. One last question. T Pritch 30 says most overrated tactics. And I assume what he means by that is like overrated hunting tactics. I tried to think about this one for a little bit. Like, what are some things that are kind of hot that are overrated right now? Like, what styles of people? Do you have any? You're smiling. It sounds like you got one.
I do, but I want to hear your answer first.
No, I don't have any.
Okay, so that was mine because I was trying to think. I was like, well, what do you mean by tactics? Like is it like techniques? Like is it like the, you know, like maybe trying to rattle, trying to call too much, stuff like that. But then I like, because I thought about this one too, and I was like, well, who am I to say something's overrated, right? Because like you can hunt however you want. You can hunt in blue jeans and a flannel shirt, and as you like to say, play the grunt flute. And one might come strolling in. Like, it's just, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, right? So like, who am I to say like if something's overrated or not? But I will say this: we recently did a podcast, and before this podcast, I would this would have been my answer 100%, and it is the over glorified scent eliminating method, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be 100% an overrated tactic. But we recently jumped on a podcast with John. And yes. And as a lot of people know, he's like super big into like the scent lock, the carbon. I'm not smart. Help me out with the words. The carbon.
Activated carbon, what it is.
Yes. And basically, in a nutshell, he doesn't play the wind like for his own scent. Like he still plays the wind to base it off of how the deer will use the wind. But for himself and the scent, he does not watch the wind whatsoever. And that's due to his scent eliminating active carbon suit method of hunting. And before, I would say that would have been completely BS. And that would have been my overused tactic or whatever. But after listening to him talk, and I feel like everybody needs to go listen to that if you haven't already. Mm-hmm. It's really good. And it kind of makes me think there might be something to that, especially like, because I thought about this the other day. I was like, that would really be like, again, we haven't tested it, but like that would really be beneficial, especially like in the mountainous area where we hunt, where you could look on your weather app and it could be saying, oh, the wind's blowing northeast today. Well, you get down there in one of them bowls, it could be blowing
southwest.
Yeah, literally. And it's just like, and then in 2 hours it might change. And it's just like, well, if that suit actually works, and if his method actually works, that would literally be a game changer. Because it's just like, you already don't know really where the wind's going to blow until you get to that tree. And then even if you do know, and it's like, okay, the wind's probably right. In that mountain area where we hunt, it's just like, you don't know really where the deer's going to come out at even. Because the way we got it, they bed.
I don't think they do either.
Exactly. Yeah. There ain't no rhyme or reason to which way they come in. And so like, I was like, that might be a game changer down there, but I don't know.
I think the one that I thought about was, especially in the context of public land, was like, that's overrated, is like bump and dump. I like bump and dumping. I like jumping deer too. I don't like jumping deer. Take that back. Don't ever quote me on that.
You heard it here, folks. First here, folks.
If I jump a deer, I take it as encouragement more than I do discouragement, because I'm like, okay, there's deer here. I think with bump and dump, like people have gotten extremely comfortable just trekking all around and being like, well, I'm not going to hunt until I jump one, until I find a big buck that's jumped, and then I'll get up in a tree. It's like, big buck is not going to let you probably see him run away for the most part. Like he's going to see you and run off. So I think that could be overrated in the context of public land. I think it gives people it's like anything, right? Like you take it out of context and use it in the wrong way, it's going to be detrimental. And I see a lot of that. A lot of people doing that.
People, like you said, trek their way through instead of hunting or scouting their way through.
Yes.
And then also in the bump and dump strategy, whenever you were saying that, I did think of a flaw. And this might have been what you're trying to touch on, is when you said a big buck wasn't going to let you watch him run away. To me personally, I think big bucks don't run away. I think they just stay in their bed and watch you walk past.
That makes me so sad. I wish they would run away.
Do you not agree though?
Depending on the environment that you hunt, but in the context of where we hunt,
right, and that's basically where I try to base everything off of.
I 100% agree with that. Like, how many deer have I walked by that are just like, and I noticed this one time when we were postseason scouting one time in a select cut. So there had been a lot of native grasses, like really tall, but everything was dead because it was postseason, basically, or the end part of the season. There was a doe that was laying in the grass, and I think she thought she was way more hidden than she was in that grass, and she was just watching us, like, walk by. And I was like, dude, she's not getting up. And, like, we walked towards her, and she was just like, well, I think she thought they don't see me, or they can't see me.
I mean, if they feel comfortable, I mean, I'm sure like there's quite a bit of coyotes and stuff down there. So like, I'm sure they're like, hey, I feel like this is pretty bulletproof.
And when you think about the color of those grasses, they are not at risk for you seeing them. A good example, remember when I shot my buck that we jumped on public that one time, and I was going to go shoot him again. We were 7 yards from him.
Right.
Following a blood trail, and he was in the grass, and someone was like, he's right there. And I was like, I don't see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
He was 7 yards away.
What's that video called?
Public land, warrior buck. Hold on 1 second. I'll find exactly what it is. Toughest buck ever.
Y'all can actually see that on footage, like a play-by-play. It's bad to the bone.
Yeah, toughest buck ever, bow hunting warrior deer on Oklahoma public land. That's on the Hunter's Advantage main channel. You can see it in the video. Like, that deer is 7 yards away, and if you like stare and squint, you can start to see outlines of horns, and you're like, oh, there he is. But I can't tell you the amount of giants I've probably walked 15, 20 yards by.
Well, one last example. I mean, this isn't a good example as you just said, but the biggest buck we've probably ever seen on hoof to this date. Yeah,
Mr.
Krabs. And he was bedded. And the thing is, we didn't see him. There was this like old beat down road, and there was like a smaller buck and a few doe bedding down on this road. And what do the mature bucks do? They're not going to lay down in an open edge or something like that. We didn't see this buck until we were like, hey, let's just get as close as we can to them. Like, we weren't really trying to hide by no means, but we didn't even see that buck. Granted, we didn't have no binos or anything, but we were only like, what?
100. How far?
I don't know.
100 yards away? 150 yards
maybe
away? Not far.
We started getting closer and closer, and all of a sudden, like, it was beautiful. Wind was blowing in our face. We were heading towards them, and they were bedded looking the opposite way. Well, as soon as we got relatively close, like probably like I'd say 100 yards, yeah. They get up and seen us, and all of a sudden, one deer starts running away. All the does start running away, and then how big do you think the other buck was that was with them?
Mid 120s, maybe 130 max.
And Christy has a video on his phone still, and it's grainy as heck, but maybe you can pop that up, maybe not. But that actually might give away too much on location, so probably not.
Yeah, probably.
So yeah, like a 120, 125 buck starts running away, and then all of a sudden, just out of thin air, easily a 170 net deer is just gliding. I don't even think big deer like that even walk or run. I think they just glide and levitate. And they, no, I'm not kidding, just up and over that hill. And we were like, where did he come from?
Grass.
Another good example. I think maybe, what if, because that just makes me think, what if those other deer weren't there and he was just bedded right there? Would we have walked right by him and not even seen him?
Probably.
Or do you think he would have busted out? Like, obviously we don't know, but
I think for the most part, those deer like let you walk by. And in my experience, well, I say in my experience as I don't see them, but
yeah,
in my experience,
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Wrapping up here. What do we got news since we last been on the podcast? We got the Johnny Eberhard podcast that came out. That one was awesome. You guys want like a heavily pressured buck hunting on public land, like masterclass? That is a great podcast episode. We have a video version. I know 95% of the people that listen to the podcast are on Spotify or Apple or Google Podcasts or Stitcher or whatever. but we have a video version. It's pretty cool. So go check out our second channel, Hunter's Advantage Podcast. It's a slightly different, it's the same logo, just a different color. And
doesn't mean you can't subscribe though.
Yeah. Appreciate you subscribing. New video. We have the Void video out now. So we thought this whole episode was pretty much based around the Void. That video's out. You got to go watch it for Jake because he put a lot of time into researching and filming that. We got another video on the horizon.
Basically, make sure that you click the bell notification because there's another video coming out.
That's right. Awesome podcast coming next week. Absolute whitetail killer.
He also starts with a J.
Gosh, we're on a roll with the J's. We really are.
And again, guys, I know when you hear whitetail killer, he starts with a J. You immediately think of @Jake_Gaylord, but shockingly, that's not who we're talking about.
No, this man is much older and much wiser and probably has more big bucks.
And more hair.
And more hair. Yeah. So we got a really awesome guy coming on next week. So with that, go check out the YouTube. Please, we're trying to get to 100 rating reviews on Spotify and Apple. I think we have 83 on Apple and like 40 on Spotify. Please go leave us a 5-star rating and review. And if you send us a message, we might just send you a unreleased hat that we're working on. That's a nice way to incentivize some folks.
Yeah, for $25.
No, I'm saying one person. Anyways, thank you guys. Thank you guys for listening. Thanks for supporting us. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode.
Jesus loves you.
Bye. Thank you guys so much for checking out the Hunter's Advantage podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to the podcast. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you in the next episode.